The rain hammered the Midwest freight train, a relentless downpour that blurred the world beyond the locomotive's grimy windows. John Harlan, a weathered railway conductor in his late 60s, stood in the control car, his eyes scanning the tracks ahead. His final shift before retirement was meant to be routine, a quiet end to a 40-year career. But the storm felt personal, stirring memories of a night he'd never forget. 5 years ago, his son Tommy died in a train derailment on a similar rainy night, an accident John blamed on himself for not reporting a faulty signal. Tonight, he wanted to handle incidents one last time, to prove he could protect others where he'd failed Tommy. The train rumbled through rural Illinois, its cars loaded with coal and grain, the rhythm of the rails a familiar comfort. John's crew, young Eddie on the controls and veteran mechanic Clara, joked in the cramped cabin, her voices cutting through the storm's roar. But John's focus was elsewhere, drawn to an old rusted car at the train's tail, known among rail workers as the Empty One. Rumors swirled about it. Groans heard only in heavy rain, a car that seemed to carry nothing but stories. As the rain intensified, a low, guttural groan echoed from the rear, faint but unmistakable, like a moan trapped in metal. John froze, his coffee mug halfway to his lips. "You hear that?" he asked, his voice gruff. Eddie shrugged, adjusting the throttle. "Just the storm, boss. Old cars creak in this weather." Clara, wiping grease from her hands, smirked. "Or it's the ghost car." "You know the stories, John." He forced a laugh, but his gut twisted. The groans reminded him of Tommy's voice, calling for help in his nightmares. John had spent years burying that guilt, throwing himself into work, ensuring every shift was flawless. Retirement loomed, but he couldn't leave without facing the past, without proving he could handle whatever came. He grabbed his flashlight and raincoat. "Gonna check the cars? Make sure everything's secure." Eddie raised an eyebrow. "In this, you're crazy." "Let him go," Clara said, her tone softer. "Shh. It's his last ride." John stepped into the storm, the rain soaking him instantly, the wind biting through his coat. The train's cars loomed like shadowed giants, their metal surfaces slick and cold. He moved toward the empty car, its faded paint barely visible in the flashlight's beam. The groans came again, louder, rhythmic, as if the car itself were alive. He peered through a cracked window. Nothing but darkness inside, the faint glint of coal dust on the floor. "Imagination," he muttered, but his heart raced. The storm felt like the one that took Tommy the night he'd ignored the signal warning. He shook off the memory, checking the car's couplings, finding them secure. Yet the groans persisted, mingling with a faint whisper, like voices too soft to decipher. Back in the control car, John dried off, his hands trembling slightly. Clara noticed. "You okay, old man? Look like you've seen a ghost." He forced a grin.
"Dad, car's fine."
But he wasn't fine. The groans had stirred something deep, a need to confront the incidents he'd avoided, mechanical failures, late-night anomalies, his own mistakes. He pulled out a worn photo of Tommy, taken on a sunny day by the tracks, his son's grin wide and trusting. "I'm sorry," John whispered, tucking it away. The crew swapped stories to lighten the mood. Eddie talking about his kid's baseball game, Clara reminiscing about her first shift. John listened, his thoughts drifting to Tommy's laughter, his dreams of becoming a conductor. The guilt was a weight, but helping this train run smoothly was his last chance to make things right. As midnight approached, the rain grew heavier, the groans louder, echoing through the cars. John checked the manifest, a habit to stay grounded, but the empty car was listed only as unloaded freight, no details, no origin. He frowned, his curiosity piqued. "Clara, you ever see paperwork on that car?" She shook her head. "It's always been there. Nobody questions it." The groans came again, sharper, almost human. John's skin prickled, the whispers clearer now, like a plea for help. Stood flashlight in hand, drawn back to the car. The storm raged, lightning illuminating the tracks, and for a moment, he thought he saw a shadow move inside the empty car, a figure, fleeting and gone. John's heart pounded, his need to handle incidents now a mission. The train barreled through the night, the groans a call he couldn't ignore. Retirement was hours away, but the empty car held secrets tied to his past, and the rain was waking them. As he stepped into the storm again, he felt the weight of Tommy's loss. and something else, a fear that the groans were more than metal, and the night was far from over. The freight train rumbled through the Illinois night, its wheels clacking against the rain-soaked tracks as the storm raged on. John Harlan, his weathered face etched with the weight of his final shift, stood in the control car, the groans from the empty car at the train's tail lingering in his ears. The sound, low, guttural, almost human, had stirred memories of his son, Tommy, lost to a derailment 5 years ago. A tragedy John blamed on his own failure to act. Retirement loomed, but John's need to handle incidents and find closure drove him to confront the mystery of the groans, even as the rain intensified, making the night feel like a mirror of his darkest moment. Eddie, the young engineer, fiddled with the controls, his eyes on the gauges. "You sure about checking that car again, boss? It's just old metal whining in the storm?" Clara, the mechanic, leaned against the wall, her grease-stained hands folded. "Let him chase his ghosts. Everyone's got a story about that car. It's groans in the rain, shadows moving. My grandpa said it carried something bad once, but he wouldn't talk details." John's jaw tightened. "What kind of bad?" Clara shrugged, her eyes softening. "Accidents, maybe? Old rail lines have secrets?" "You know how it is." He did. Like the railway was a graveyard of stories, derailments, lost cargo, lost lives. Tommy's accident was one of them, a signal he'd ignored, thinking it minor. The guilt had carved itself into him, and the groans felt like a call to make things right. He pulled his raincoat tighter, grabbing his flashlight. "I'm checking again. Keep her steady, Eddie." The storm hit him like a wall as he stepped out, rain stinging his face, wind tugging at his coat. The train's cars loomed, their metal surfaces slick and dark. He moved toward the empty car, its rusted frame swaying with the train's rhythm. The groans came again, louder, rhythmic, like a heartbeat trapped in steel. He peered inside, the flashlight beam catching only coal dust and damp walls. But the air was heavy, colder than it should be. "Anyone there?" he called, his voice swallowed by the rain. No answer, but a whisper followed a faint cry, like a child's plea or maybe Tommy's voice from his nightmares. John's heart thudded, his grip tightening on the flashlight. He climbed into the car, the floor slick under his boots. The coal dust was wet, forming strange patterns, almost like footprints, but they vanished when he looked closer. Back in the control car, he shook off the rain, his hands trembling. Clara noticed her brow furrowing. "Find anything?" John said, but his voice betrayed him, just felt wrong. Eddie chuckled, trying to lighten the mood. "You're spooked, old man. Tell us a story instead. What's the worst thing you've seen on these tracks?" John hesitated, then let it spill. "Tommy's accident? Night like this, rain so thick you couldn't see. I ignored a faulty signal, thought it'd hold till morning. He was on that train break, man, just starting out. Derailment took him." The cabin fell silent, the storm's roar filling the void. Clara's eyes softened. "That's heavy, John. You've carried it a long time." "Yeah," he said, pulling out Tommy's photo, his son's grin a knife in his chest. "Figured this last shift I'd make sure everything's right. No loose ends." The groans came again, sharper, echoing through the cars. Eddie frowned. "That's not normal. Want me to stop her?" John shook his head. "Keep going. I'll figure it out." He checked the manifest again, flipping through pages of cargo lists. The empty car was there, labeled unloaded freight. No origin or destination. It's just a number. 47B. He frowned, his curiosity deepening. "Clara, you ever hear of a car not being in the system?" She nodded. "Heard of orphan cars ones, they keep running but don't track, usually from old accidents, left on the line for reasons." John's skin prickled. The groans were louder now, accompanied by whispers, pleas, cries, names he couldn't make out. He stood, needing to move, to do something. The train barreled through the night, the rain a curtain of sound, and John felt Tommy's absence like a physical weight. The empty car was more than a rumor, it was a secret tied to the railway's past and maybe his own. As he stepped back into the storm, the groans became a chorus, the whispers clearer, like voices trapped in the rain. He saw a shadow flicker in the car's window, too quick to be sure. His need to handle this incident, to end his career clean, was now a mission. The train kept moving, but the empty car felt like it was pulling him. The night promised answers John wasn't sure he wanted to hear. The freight train thundered through the Illinois night, its wheels grinding against rain-slicked tracks, as the storm roared with unrelenting fury. John Harlan stood in the control car, his raincoat still dripping from his second trip to the empty car at the train's tail. The groans, low, rhythmic, almost human, had grown louder, accompanied by whispers that sounded like pleas, stirring memories of his son Tommy, lost in a derailment 5 years ago. John's final shift before retirement was meant to be his chance to handle incidents and find closure for his guilt. But the empty car's mystery was unraveling into something far darker, pulling him toward a truth he wasn't ready to face. Eddie, the young engineer, glanced at him from the controls. "You look like hell, John. That car spooking you?" Clara, the mechanic, leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "He's chasing ghosts. Told you that car's got stories. My grandpa said it groaned during storms, like it's crying for someone." John's jaw tightened. It's not just stories. Something's off. The whispers he'd heard, the fleeting shadow in the car's window, they weren't just his imagination. His guilt over Tommy's death, tied to an ignored signal, made every sound feel personal, like the train itself was accusing him. He grabbed the manifest again, flipping to the entry for car 47B, labeled only as unloaded freight. "Clara, you said orphaned cars come from accidents? Any records on this one?" She shook her head. "Not that I've seen. Old lines like this, they lose track of cars sometimes. Paperwork gets buried." John's curiosity burned, his need to resolve this incident driving him. He headed to the crew's storage locker, digging through old logbooks and schedules. Most were mundane cargo lists. Maintenance notes, but one, tucked at the bottom, was different. Its pages were yellowed, dated 1973, detailing a derailment on this line during a storm. The details were vague, mentioning unclaimed cargo stored in an unmarked car, but no specifics. John's heart quickened. Car 47B wasn't listed in the current system, an orphaned compartment that shouldn't exist. Back in the control car, the groans grew louder, rhythmic, like a heartbeat echoing through the train. The rain pounded harder, and John heard the whispers again, fainter, but clearer, like voices calling names. One sounded like Tommy's, a plea from his nightmares. "Dad, help." He froze, his breath catching, the photo of his son burning in his pocket. "You okay?" Eddie asked, his voice cutting through the storm. John nodded, but his hands trembled. I thought I heard something." Clara's eyes narrowed. "Not the first. Grandpa said those groans come when the rain's worst, like the car's remembering something." John's mind raced. The logbook, the groans, the whispers, they pointed to a buried history. He stepped back into the storm, flashlight in hand, drawn to the empty car. The rain stung his face as he climbed the coupling, peering inside. The coal dust was wet, forming strange patterns on the floor numbers, jagged and uneven. 732. He blinked and they were gone, but his pulse raced. Was it a date? A train number? The car groaned again, a low moan that vibrated in his chest, and a shadow flickered in the corner, a figure. Too vague to make out, vanishing when he turned. He stumbled back to the control car, soaked and shaken. "Hey, Clara, you ever see coal dust move like that?"
Like it's writing something?
Her face paled. "No, but Grandpa said the rain brings things out, things the railway forgot." John confided in her, his voice low.
"Tommy's accident, it was my fault. He hit a signal. Thought he could wait. I hear him sometimes in storms like this."
"That car, it's like it knows." Clara's hand rested on his shoulder. "Not crazy, John. This line's got ghosts."
Always has.
The groans intensified, the whispers now a chorus, pleading, accusing. John's fear grew, but so did his resolve. He needed to know what car 47B was hiding, why it groaned, why it felt tied to Tommy. He checked the logbook again, finding a scribbled note. "Car 47B, sealed after 73. Do not open." His stomach twisted, sealed for what? The train barreled on, the storm, a wall of sound and water. John's guilt, his need to make things right, pushed him forward. But the empty car was no longer just a mystery. It's a threat, its groans a call from a past the railway had buried. As he prepared to check it again, the cold dust patterns flashed in his mind, and the whispers grew louder, Tommy's voice among them. The night was closing in, and John feared the car's secrets might demand more than his last shift could give. The freight train roared through the Illinois night, its cars swaying under the onslaught of a relentless rainstorm. John Harlan stood in the control car, his rain-soaked coat dripping onto the floor. The groans from the empty car number for 7 echoing in his mind. The discovery of the 1973 logbook, hinting at a forgotten derailment and unclaimed cargo sealed in the car, had deepened his unease. The whispers, sounding too much like his son Tommy's voice, stirred the guilt of failing to report a faulty signal 5 years ago, a mistake that cost Tommy his life. John's final shift before retirement was meant to be his redemption. He had a chance to handle incidents and find closure, but the car's mystery was pulling him into a darker past. Eddie, the engineer, glanced at him from the controls. "You're obsessed, John. That car's just old junk creaking." Clara, the mechanic, wasn't so sure. "He's got a point, Eddie. That car's not right. And my grandpa said it carried something after a bad wreck. Something they didn't want found." John's heart thudded. The logbook's note, "Do not open," burning in his memory. The coal dust patterns he'd seen, forming numbers like 732, felt like a clue. It's maybe a train number from the 73 accident. He dug through the storage locker again, finding a faded maintenance report buried under schedules. It detailed a derailment on this line during a storm, a passenger train that crashed, killing several. The report mentioned unclaimed remains stored in a freight car for 7B, sealed and forgotten. John's stomach twisted. The groans weren't just metal. He returned to the control car, the groans now louder, morphing into sobs that cut through the storm's roar. "You hear that?" he asked, his voice shaky. Eddie frowned. "Just the wind, man." But Clara's eyes widened. "That's no wind. It's like crying." John grabbed his flashlight, driven by a need to confront the car's secrets. The rain lashed him as he stepped out, the train's motion jarring his steps. At car 47B, the groans were deafening, a chorus of sorrow vibrating through the metal. He climbed inside, the air icy, the cold dust wet and shifting. The numbers appeared against 7, -3, -2, etched in the dust, glowing faintly under his flashlight. A shadow moved, and John spun, catching a glimpse of a figure, pale, translucent, its face blurred but pleading. He stumbled back, heart pounding, and the figure vanished. The sobs grew louder, and whispers filled the car names. "Please," Tommy's voice among them. "Dad, why?" John's knees buckled, his guilt surging. He saw Tommy's face in his mind, smiling by the tracks, then broken in the wreck he'd failed to prevent. Back in the control car, John's hands shook as he showed Clara the report. "This car, it's carrying remains from 73. People left behind, forgotten. That's what Grandpa meant. Grandpa meant. Something bad they didn't want found." Eddie scoffed, but his voice wavered. "Go on." John ignored him, his mind racing. The groans, the whispers, the cold dust numbers, they were tied to the accident. 2 souls left unclaimed. He confided in Clara, his voice low. "Tommy died because I didn't act. I ignored a signal, thought it'd hold. I hear him in that car, like it's calling me to fix it." Clara's hand rested on his arm. "You're not crazy, John. This line's got history. Maybe you're meant to face it." The train lurched, the storm worsening, and the sobs became screams echoing through the cars. John ran back to 47B, flashlight shaking. The coal dust had formed new patterns, a date, the 3rd of July, 73, and a name, Mary Ellis. Apparitions flickered, translucent figures crowding the car, their faces gaunt, eyes hollow. One reached out, its hand cold on John's wrist, whispering, "Find us." He bolted from the car, panic overtaking him. The train sped through the night, the rain a wall of water, and John felt trapped, the ghost's pleas mirroring his guilt. He returned to the control car, breathless, and told Clara they're in their people from the wreck. They want something. She nodded, her voice steady. "Maybe they need someone to remember them." John's fear grew, but so did his resolve. The car wasn't just haunted, it was a tomb carrying souls tied to a tragedy the railway buried. He checked the time. It was nearing 2 a.m., the hour noted in the report for the 73 derailment. The groans were relentless, the whispers a chorus of pain, and John knew he had to act. His last shift was no longer about retirement, it was about facing the past, his own and the train's, before the storm claimed him too. The freight train barreled through the Illinois night, its wheels screaming against the rain-soaked tracks. As the storm reached a fever pitch, John Harlan stood in the control car, his heart pounding. The groans from car 47 be haunted by unclaimed remains. From a 1973 derailment echoing in his ears. The discovery of the buried accident, the coal dust forming dates and names, and the apparitions pleading for remembrance had turned his final shift into a nightmare. His guilt over his son Tommy's death, caused by his failure to report a faulty signal. Intertwined with the car's restless spirits, their cries mirroring his own regrets. John's need to handle incidents and find closure now felt like a desperate fight for redemption and survival. Eddie, the engineer, gripped the controls, his voice tense. "John, you're freaking me out. You saying there's ghosts back there?" Clara, the mechanic, stared at John, her face pale. "He's not wrong, Eddie. That car's been trouble since my grandpa's day. Those groans, they're not metal." John's hand shook as he clutched the 1973 logbook, its pages detailing the forgotten crash that left bodies unclaimed. Sealed in car 47B, the coal dust patterns the 3rd of July 73, Mary Ellis burned in his mind. And the ghostly hand on his wrist still lingered, cold as death. "They're trapped," he said, his voice hoarse. "They want us to know they're there." The train lurched, the storm's wind howling like a living thing. The groans turned to wails, piercing the cabin, and John heard Tommy's voice clearly now. "Dad, help us." His knees buckled, visions of his son's mangled train flashing wreckage, Rain, Tommy's broken body. The apparitions from 47B appeared in the control car. Translucent figures crowding the space, their faces gaunt, eyes pleading. A woman, maybe Mary Ellis, reached out, her voice a whisper. "Stop the train." Eddie yelped, swerving the controls. Clara grabbed John's arm. "They're real, aren't they?" John nodded, his fear mixing with sympathy. The ghosts weren't just haunting, they were desperate, tied to the car, reliving their final moments every storm. He ran 247B, the rain blinding him as he climbed the coupling. Inside, the air was freezing, the coal dust swirling into new patterns a train number. 732, glowing faintly. The apparitions solidified. A dozen figures, men, women, a child. Their clothes torn, faces wet with rain that never stopped. "Stop the train," they chanted, their voices a chorus of pain. The child's ghost, a boy not unlike Tommy, stepped forward. "It's time," he said, his eyes locking onto John's. John's heart raced. The logbook had noted the derailment at 2:13 a.m., and his watch read 2:05. "What happens if I stop it?" he asked, his voice trembling. The woman's ghost answered, her voice soft but urgent. "You pay us a visit, you let us go." John stumbled back to the control car, the wails deafening.
Eddie!
"Slow her down," he shouted. "We need to stop at 2:13. Eddie's eyes widened. "You're crazy, we're on a schedule," Clara intervened, her voice firm. "Do it, Eddie. He's right." The train slowed, the brakes screeching, the storm raging outside. John's mind spun Tommy's accident, his failure, the ghost's pleas. He saw his son's face among the apparitions, accusing yet hopeful. "I'm sorry, Tommy," he whispered, tears mixing with the rain on his face. "I'm doing this for you, for them." The apparitions crowded closer, their forms flickering as the clock ticked closer to 2:13. The coal dust in 47B swirled, forming a final message. "Remember us." John's guilt overwhelmed him, his need to make things right driving him. He grabbed the radio, shouting to Eddie, "Stop her now!" The train shuddered, grinding to a halt. The groans peaked, a scream that shook the cars, and the apparitions lunged. Their hands passing through John, cold and desperate. He fell to his knees, visions of the 73 derailment, flashing wreckage, screams, bodies left unclaimed in the rain. "Out!" Tommy's face appeared, not accusing but pleading, his hand outstretched. "I see you," John said, his voice breaking. "I'm here." The ghosts paused, their wails softening. The woman's ghost smiled faintly, her form fading. The train was stopped at the exact moment of the past, 2:13 a.m., the storm a mirror of that night. John felt the weight of his guilt shift, not gone but shared, as if the ghosts were carrying it with him. The cabin fell silent, the rain still pounding, but the groans were gone. John's fear remained, but so did his resolve. He'd faced the car's secrets, but the night wasn't over. And the ghost's final demand hung in the air, a reprieve that might cost him more than he could give. The freight train stood motionless on the rain-soaked tracks in rural Illinois, its brakes hissing as the storm raged around it. John Harlan knelt in the control car, his breath ragged. The ghostly apparitions from car 47B fading, but their presence lingering like a cold weight in his chest. He had stopped the train at exactly 2:13 a.m., the precise moment of the 1973 derailment that left unclaimed remains sealed in the car, their groans and pleas haunting every storm. The ghost's men, women, a child, and the echo of his son Tommy had demanded he pay them a final visit, tying their unrest to John's guilt over Tommy's death, a tragedy born of his failure to report a faulty signal 5 years ago. This final shift, meant to be his redemption before retirement, had become a confrontation with the past, and John feared what it would cost to set the spirits free. Eddie, the engineer, stared at him, his hands shaking on the controls. "John, what the hell just happened? Those things were real?" Clara, the mechanic, gripped John's shoulder, her voice steady but strained. "You did it, John. You stopped the train." They're quiet now, but John wasn't sure. The rain pounded the windows, and though the groans had stopped, the whispers lingered, faint but persistent, like a plea not fully answered. The coal dust in car 47B had spelled "Remember Us," and John felt their weight souls forgotten by the railway, left unclaimed, just as he'd left Tommy to die. His son's apparition had been among them, not accusing but hopeful, urging him to finish what he'd started. John stood, his legs unsteady, and grabbed his flashlight. "I need to check the car one last time," he said, his voice hoarse. Eddie protested. "You're crazy. It's done." Clara nodded, understanding. "Go, John. Finish it." The storm lashed him as he stepped out, the rain a curtain of ice. Car 47B loomed, its rusted frame silent now, but the air was heavy, expectant. He climbed inside, the coal dust still wet, the patterns gone. The ghosts appeared again, fainter but clearer, their faces no longer twisted in pain. The woman, Mary Ellis, stepped forward, her translucent form glowing softly. "You stopped for us," she said, her voice calm. "You saw us." John's throat tightened, tears mixing with the rain. "I'm sorry," he said, addressing her, the others. "Tommy, I should have acted sooner for you, for my son. I left him like you were left." The child's ghost, the boy who resembled Tommy, smiled faintly. "You came back." John's heart ached, his guilt a raw wound. The logbook had revealed the truth. These were the unclaimed remains of the 73 derailment. Sealed in this car, forgotten by the world. By stopping the train at 2:13, he'd given them a moment to be remembered, a final visit to their last journey. He knelt in the car, his voice breaking. "I see you now. I won't forget." The ghosts gathered closer, their forms shimmering. Tommy's apparition appeared, his grin the same as in the photo John carried. "Thanks, Dad," he whispered, his hand brushing John's, cold but forgiving. The apparitions began to fade, their faces peaceful, their whispers softening into silence. The rain stopped abruptly, the storm's roar replaced by an eerie calm. John stumbled back to the control car, soaked and exhausted, but lighter, as if the ghosts had taken some of his guilt with them. Clara met his gaze. "It's over, isn't it?" John nodded, his voice barely audible. "They're at peace." Eddie restarted the train, the wheels grinding slowly. The sky cleared, stars piercing the clouds, and car 47B was silent, its weight gone. John pulled out Tommy's photo, his son's smile no longer a knife but a comfort. He'd handled this incident, given the forgotten souls a reprieve, and found forgiveness not just for them, but for himself. As the train rolled toward its final stop, John prepared for retirement, his career ending with a quiet victory. But as he stepped off at the depot, a faint whisper followed a woman's voice. Or maybe Tommy's, carried on a breeze that shouldn't exist. The car was empty now, its remains released, but the railway held memories, and John knew storms would always bring echoes. I'd paid his final visit, but the ghosts had left a mark, a reminder that some debts are never fully paid. The tracks stretched into the night, and John walked away. His heart lighter, but his steps cautious, as if the rain might call him back.